I mentioned food. You know what we eat and do not eat, but you've been outside the walls of Khazad-dûm but twice, seen orcs, men and elves once, and never dined with them. Whereas we enjoy meat off the bone, and there's nary a dwarf who would say no to spit-roasted boar, and would say that it wasn't his personal favourite, even among the stiff-beards who very rarely get it. Other peoples eat all manner of beast and creepy-crawly, not to mention all kinds of bread, strange fruits and vegetables, and even weeds. Like I said, they even munch down on toasted wee bugs like there was no tomorrow. Insects, da? Aye, son, even that. Of course, we could eat those too. There's plenty of them, especially spiders, in the raw caverns we mine and spaces we have not yet cleared out for living. But let the miners worry about that, and let us focus on smithing and not mining. Nay, son, a good dwarf eats hearty food. Venison that we hunt outside our holes, mutton from the sheep we herd that graze off the mountainside or on the iron hills, veal, pork and poultry we buy from the Akazad. The stiff-beards do a lot of fishing up in Forochel, as well as hunt seal and other beasts of that land. Of course, we buy grain from the men of Arnor and the men of other lands. The Iron Fists of the Iron Hills, for instance, buy theirs from the Dorwinians of Dorwinion. Out of this grain we make all manner of bread. This is made both by our bakers and our wives. Among the Iron Fists it's said that the husbands are as adept at this art as are their wives. The most famous of all of our bread, and you know there's great variety among non-dwarves, is undoubtedly CRAM. Now, to my mind, your mother bakes the best CRAM there ever is, and as a lad you don't really know how to make it, but I've stood by her and even lent her a hand, and I think I can make it fairly well myself. You're a strapping young lad, you'll soon find yourself a wife, but if you don't, and you have to go on a journey after your mother and I are gone, and have no mind to pay the baker the coppers to buy some, here's the recipe. 5 to 5.5 ounces of butter, 3.5 ounces of sugar, a 1/4 cup of honey, 2 large eggs, 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, a cup of fine wheat flour, 1/3 cup of whole wheat flour, 5 ounces of nuts of any variety that you need to chop, 1.5 ounces of cranberries, a 1/3 cup of rolled oats. First, you need to heat up the oven till it's rather hot, but not scalding. You're not melting mithril. Then you should paddle the butter until it's smooth. This may take some time, so if you have a magical or mechanical device to do it for you, so much the better. I think I may have seen one of these down deep in a workshop of the Artificers Guild or on another world. Then ye add the sugar and the honey and paddle until it's all mixed nice and smooth. Then add each egg at a time and make sure to scrape the bowl. Then add the vanilla. Then add your flour as 3 separate loads. Make sure to scrape the bowl in between each addition. Now it's time to add your nuts, cranberries and oats. Mix it well. Now scoop the dough into biscuits on a baking sheet. Use about 1/4 cup of dough for each biscuit. Of course, you need to grease the sheet with butter or some other fat, unless you've got some sort of magical parchment or something to put under them. If you no longer live in these deep quarters and yours are near the surface and it's in the winter, or you're high up nigh the mountain top, I heard from one of your mum's friends you can even put the sheet and biscuits out in the snow outside your windows, if you have one, for half an hour. Then bake them for about a quarter to half an hour, but don't let them burn, or it'll all have been for naught. They'll be hard enough even if they're done proper. Then leave them to cool on a rack, and once they're cool, you can stick them in a towel or a burlap sack and put them in your pack. Like I said, we dwarves, no matter the clan, have a varied diet. We mainly eat meat and bread because of where we live, except for the stiff-beards, who, as I said, eat a lot of fish. And you know, we also eat quite a lot of mushrooms and fungi, because they're some of the few things that grow down here, and mosses. They also grow near the openings of our strongholds, here at Khazad-dûm, but also in the grey mountains, the red and the blue. Chanterelle and boar pie and spit-roasted boar with chanterelle cream sauce are actually two of my favourite meals. If she can't find any chanterelles when she's out foraging in Holland, your mother makes do with the closed-cup mushrooms, and to be honest, I think they're almost just as good. As for drink, you know, that I don't like water. Can't stand it except for the occasional bath, and I don't even have that as much as your mother would like. Well, your mum's the same. About drinking water, I mean. You don't like it either, as far as I can tell. When you think about it, can you say that you know any dwarf who actually likes to drink it? Or sail on it, for that matter? None! Right. Well, you know, son, elves and men, they do. Perhaps not as much as drinking wine or ale, but they do like drinking water. At least the average person, and they drink a lot of it. Remember after suckling your mother's teat, what first you rank? Of course you don't. Mead! You know what elvish and mannish children drink after they've been weaned off their mother's titties? Water! Can you believe it? The torture! Well, we dwarves did not invent ale or wine or even mead. Matter of fact, no one knows who invented ale or wine. Mead was invented by the Northmen. As for wine, I wouldn't drink it if I had nothing else in the desert. 'Tis almost as bad as water, and most dwarves except a Blacklock would agree with me. 'Tis said the Blacklocks have grown accustomed to its bitter taste, and that they order barrels of the stuff from Dorwinion to the Orocarni, and that they pay for it in weapons of steel. Bah! Give me a flagon of ale, or mead, any day. Dwarven ale, dwarven mead! The Norsemen may have invented the latter, and many of the creatures that walk on two legs in Arda may produce both. But when it comes to the making them perfection, you need look no further than the breweries of the Khazad-dûm. I'll grant ye, the Anfis make a fine brew, especially of mead, given their nearness to the beehives of the woodmen, a branch of the Northmanish race, of greenwood, and indeed any dwarvish brew of ale or mead is better than that of other races, including the mead of the Northmen, which is said to be the best the race of men can produce. Now I've told you a lot about the dwarves of Middle-earth in Arda, but there are plenty of dwarves in other worlds than Arda, dwarves and worlds I have visited in my plains walking. Like I said before, the differences between the dwarves of different worlds are generally minuscule. They're so small, in fact, that only the one time I went to the world of Athas under the dark sun was I not thought to be a dwarf of that world I visited. On Athas, dwarves have no beards or other hair on their bodies. Perhaps because of the vast cataclysm this world suffered in the past, I don't know. All I know is that was the only place where the dwarves did not take me for a local dwarf. I have been many times to the world of Toril. There are many races of dwarf there, 5 of them good and even 1 evil. Now, you've but once seen the race of men, and didn't then, so far as I can remember, see any bold men. There were plenty of bold orcs, and indeed the trait is very common in the race here in Middle-earth. So common, in fact, that very few orcs are not bold. But you rarely remember that on any details in your first battle, and that's fine, lad, no shame in it. As there are no bold dwarves in Middle-earth, you're not accustomed to it. Boldness is when you have no hair on the top of your skull, just so you know if you didn't know, and sometimes no hair anywhere on it but the hair on your face. A lot of bold men, but no bold orcs, have tiny whiskers on both sides of their heads. But boldness is not a thing among the Dunedain, the high men of the West, and the men you met when we were outside the West Gate in Holland and ran into those orcs were all Dunedain of Arnor. And that's the only big difference between us and the Dwarves of Toril. A lot of them have nary a strand on their heads, but they do have large, luscious beards, just like us, including some of their women. Unlike us in Arda, the Dwarves on Toril did not start out separately in 7 distinct clans or houses with 7 separate mansions in which they awoke, but as one people, made on Mount Celestia by the god Mahal, whom they call Moradin, though in his separate existence in Toril, and then planted asleep deep under the surface of that world where they awoke. Now, as you know, we dwarves in Arda reach a state of maturity when we attain the appearance we will have for most of our lives around age 40, and then keep that appearance until we're around 240 for Durin's folk, after which our decline is rapid, though we never grow bold. However, as you also know, you are only given the right to choose for yourself and go whither you want on reaching the age of 100, which you have yet to reach. The Dwarves of Toril only reach their mature look and stature around age 50, but their lifespans are longer than the average dwarf in Arda, which for us longbeards is around 250 now in the 3rd age. It used to be longer. For the firebeards around 230, the broadbeams perhaps 5 years longer than that, the stonefoot's about 200, the ironfists 220, the blacklocks around 10 more, and the stiffbeards, who lead the harshest lives by far up in the frozen wastes, around 200. Our kings, the great Durin, so far have lived a lot longer, until it has become time for the king to shed his mortal body and be reborn in his own offspring, his soul migrating to his own son. The Dwarves of Toril live until 350 on average, and like us, their bodies are hale and active for most of their lives. Like I said, some of their women have beards, like most of ours, but some of theirs shave them off, or more commonly use a minor spell or incantation bestowed upon them by their gods to get rid of it. I can see the rage in your eyes, but you see, the dwarves there often live much closer to the race of man than we do, and so they try to look like their mannish female neighbours. The 2 most numerous breeds of dwarf in Toril are the gold dwarves and the shield dwarves. They weren't 2 clans of dwarves born apart, but the same people split by history. All dwarves on Toril were born together under the mountains of Yehimal, which separated 3 continents, Faerun, Karatur, and Zakhara, and then migrated to other corners of their world from there. First to leave were what would become the Arctic dwarves, very similar to our stiffbeards, who went north to the mountains of Navolarond.